Sit down. Before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements to make. First, there are no planned fire alarm tests this evening. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard off Druid Street. Council security staff will be available to direct you. Public toilets are located off the main reception area, and please switch your mobile phones to silent. Thank you. It is with sadness that I announce the passing of Mr Danny McCarthy, past Mayor of the London Borough of Southwark, who sadly passed away on Wednesday the 1st of February 2017. Mr McCarthy has been the only person to serve 2 terms in office as Mayor, in 1991 to 92 and 1994 to 95. I understand that Councillor Peter John wishes to speak.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor. It's very sad having to pay tribute to Danny today, who was such a part of Southwark politics for so long, on both sides of the chamber, I might say. Danny was Southwark through and through, grew up in Southwark, grew up in Bermondsey, and always had incredibly strong links to the community of his birth. He was born into, as he always said, born into the Labour Party, but was a very keen and fervent trade unionist during his life as well. He served as a Labour councillor in Little Ward, and then went on with great distinction to serve as a Lib Dem councillor in Cathedrals Ward, if I remember rightly. He was, as you have said, mayor of this borough on 2 occasions. He also served as deputy mayor, if I recall correctly, in the early 2000s, when the Lib Dems were in administration in the borough. But whichever party he was representing, Danny was someone who always acted with great good humour, great spirit, and literally and figuratively crossed party boundaries in many ways. He was a great character, full of funny stories of life. Well, he was growing up in the borough, and I think of him now, and I think of him smiling and laughing, and that is a very good way to remember him. Of course, he was plagued by illness for the last decade of his life, and that I think he found incredibly difficult to bear. Well, I know he had such lengthy periods in hospital. I think it would really challenge the spirits and good spirits of anybody to face what he faced during the last decade of his life. He did come back and rejoin the Labour Party in 2008-2009, I think. It was a wonderful time to have a Labour councillor in Cathedrals Ward at that time. Who would have thought it, Adele? Who would have thought it? And again, it will happen, I'm sure, but who would have thought it? But Danny, again, I think showed his absolute spirit during that period, because it was coming to the end of his period of 6 months when he hadn't attended a council meeting. And he had been in hospital throughout this time at St Thomas's Hospital. And normally, we would probably in those circumstances agree to somebody suspending the rule, but politics were such at that time that nobody was willing to suspend that rule. But Danny came in from his sickbed. He was wheeled in, and he came into a council assembly in his hospital robe. And nothing more, I thought, showed and demonstrated his commitment to the civic side of this borough more than that. And I think his commitment that he was going to carry on serving the people he'd been elected to represent, even in spite of his illness. He is a great loss to Southwark. He was always someone who would stand up and speak about how it was important we recognise not just past mayors but others who served as councillors in this borough, and maybe a challenge to us in this chamber is to think about how we do that and remember those who served as councillors, because Danny, although he's recalled as a past mayor of this borough on 2 occasions, he thought it wasn't right that it was only past mayors who were recalled. And, you know, that's a challenge for us to think. But as I say, I'm really sorry to have lost Danny from Southwark. He was a good man, a good friend, a good colleague, and it's said often, but genuinely, I mean it, that Southwark will be a very much poorer place without Danny McCarthy.
Councillor Hobber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Danny McCarthy was not only a colleague on this council, but a constituent of mine. He lived in my ward for many years. He was, as the leader said, unique in this borough in having been mayor twice and having crossed the floor twice. I was never, as whip, I was never quite sure whether it was easier to deal with him on that side or on this side. But nevertheless, I would certainly not take away for one moment the words of the leader when he said he was really a Southwark person through and through and had the community very much in mind all the time. In fact, when he was not a councillor, he chaired the Redriff Tenants and Residents Association, unfortunately now defunct. But he and the secretary kept that going for many years. It wasn't the easiest of jobs because there were 6 housing associations involved, and of course the residents of those all had different problems and different issues to deal with. But he did hold that together for a long time, and unfortunately, since he and the secretary stood down, the thing collapsed, which shows how important it is to get the right people doing the right thing. Danny was the sort of person who, when he came into a room, you were immediately aware of his presence. And whether he was making a serious point or one of his corny jokes, we all listened. He's obviously going to be very, very much missed by his family, but I think also by many people in this borough.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I first met Danny in 1986. I was a new councillor, and he'd been a member of 4 years standing. It's sometimes difficult for me to recall those times, but it's not when it comes to Danny. I liked him, but then I defy anyone not to like him, with that wonderful laugh, something which I will always remember and recall with pleasure. I may be misremembering, but I think there was a brief period in that time when it looked as though he might be forced to resign from the council because he had fallen foul of Widdicombe. For younger members, may I assure you that that has nothing to do with the Conservative MP or his secret interest, guilty pleasure of Strictly Come Dancing. Merely, it was the fact that he worked for Lambeth Council Housing Department and he sat on Southwark Council Housing Committee. In the end, it was determined, as according to the law, though I'm not sure whether this is right, he didn't have sufficient influence in both councils for the potential conflict of interest to disbar him. And so his long and distinguished career in Southwark civic life was able to flourish. To serve twice as the borough's first citizen is demonstrably unique and a testament to his popularity. You've heard from Councillor Hubber about Danny, the Lib Dem years. I know not what brought that about, and so when I returned in 2010 and we met at civic functions, he was back in his natural home, just as if nothing had happened. Danny was Southwark Labour, not Islington Labour. He was rooted in his community, progressive in his politics, and also staunchly patriotic. I'm only sorry he's no longer here with us, as I'd love to hear his take on the future for his party and our country. May he rest in peace.
Can we stand, please, for a minute's silence? Thank you. I wish to remind everyone that we're required by law to take a recorded vote at key budget decision meetings. This requirement applies to the final substantive vote on items 2.1 and 3.1. Following consultation with the Group Whips at the Mayor's briefing, the programme motion was considered and copies have been circulated. Is the programme motion agreed? The Clerk will now explain which other papers have been circulated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In addition to the agenda papers, we also have the supplemental agenda number 1, which contains questions on reports, and supplemental agenda number 2, which contains amendments. The following papers have been circulated around the chamber this evening: responses to questions on report, which is on blue paper, and the programme motion, which is on white paper. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All councillors have been granted a dispensation by the monitoring officer to vote on the council tax report. Do any members wish to make any other declarations of interest? When making your declaration, can you please specify if it is disclosable pecuniary interest? Okay. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Maisie Anderson, Lucas Green and Eliza Mann, and I've personally had apologies from Councillor Dennis, who is too ill to stay this evening, so she will be going home.
The lateness for Councillor O'Connor, please.
Thank you. Can we approve as a correct record the open minutes of the Council Assembly meeting held on the 30th of November 2016? Agreed. And the guillotine tonight will fall at 10:03. So we move, PM. Not tomorrow morning, that's fine. Okay, so we're moving on to item 2.1, the Policy and Resources Strategy 2017 to 18, 2020 to 21 Revenue Budget. I just need to inform you that the Greater London Authority met earlier this week and agreed the precept for Southwark. Therefore, the proposed GLA precept outlined in the reports on the agenda this evening is correct. There are 2 questions on the report set out on the blue paper circulated this evening. I will ask each member who has submitted a question if they wish to ask a supplementary. Members should ensure that their supplementary questions are genuine questions and not speeches. Supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question on or the reply. So, Councillor Andy Simmons, question 1. Do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
What will the council tax increase mean in practical terms for the households in Southwark, and will the Cabinet member guarantee that the council will continue to protect our most vulnerable residents through council tax relief?
Thank you, Councillor Simmons, for your supplemental question. I think it's a really important question to ask about the affordability of council tax, particularly the council tax increase that we are putting forward tonight. I would like to assure members that we've taken this matter very seriously. 82% of residents will see a council tax bill of less than £1 a week, and crucially, those residents who are in receipt of council tax relief 70% of them will pay no more than 20p each per week. With regard to the future of the council tax relief scheme, I can assure members that it's absolutely our intention to continue with the council tax relief scheme. Indeed, we are considering the scheme and thinking about ways we may be able to improve it in the future. We have an organisation called Policy and Practice looking at the scheme, and a number of members are working with me on that to look at how we could simplify the scheme and how we can look at best practice from other boroughs to make sure that those residents on the lowest incomes are able to access that scheme as simply as possible. I think it's important to also note that we also continue to run our hardship fund and our Southwark emergency support scheme to ensure that our lowest income residents are given that help that they need.
Councillor Kerslake, do you wish to ask a supplemental question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank the Cabinet Member for her response and also take this opportunity to thank the officers who worked so hard preparing the budget and particularly responding to our questions in scrutiny. Given the funding crisis in adult social care that the Cabinet Member describes well in the context of Southwark, I'm sure we're all interested to hear about the offer that's been made to Surrey Council to deal with their budget resource issues. And I was just wondering if the Cabinet Member has been invited on behalf of Southwark or if any other councils have been invited to talk about a similar offer for Southwark.
I'd like to thank Councillor Kerslake for her excellent supplemental question. Unfortunately, no, I'm afraid we have been given no such reassurances by government as Surrey Council seems to have received that we will see any great benefits from devolution in the future. I think there's still a lack of clarity really about quite what sweetheart deal has been done for Surrey County Council, some sort of pilot on devolution, but clearly with something that gives them enough comfort that they feel that they do not need to make a significant council tax increase, whilst we still wait to hear what impact devolution of business rates might have in London. There's no indications that we're seeing that the sort of excess of business rates that are collected in London as compared to the funding that we get from government in London will be able to stay in London. So it will be very interesting as time goes on to really see the detail of exactly what Surrey has been offered. I think it is particularly galling for us here in Southwark when what we have been offered is, of course, the opportunity to increase the council tax precept for adult social care. And in Southwark, a 3% precept on the council tax raises 2.7 million. The highest indeed in Barnet is 4.5 million, but Surrey can raise £18.9 million from the adult social care precept. It simply doesn't seem fair that they are then able to benefit from sweetheart deals that boroughs like ourselves are not able to access.
Thank you. The Cabinet Member for Finance, Modernisation and Performance will present the report. Councillor Fiona Colley, you have 10 minutes in which to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the financial situation facing Southwark this year is unprecedented. An 8th year of government cuts combined with the health and social care crisis means the decisions I'm asking members to take tonight are difficult. But tempting though it is, I don't want to be too gloomy tonight. We are far from a just managing council. In fact, Southwark Council is a great success story. As an authority, we've thought big and delivered on our Fairer Future promises. Free healthy school meals, warm, dry and safe council homes, thousands of new jobs and apprenticeships. Madam Mayor, we are rebuilding and expanding our schools, and while others close libraries, we've built new ones. And not just libraries, a new leisure centre, and Madam Mayor, this year we've made good on our promise of free swim and gym use for all residents. Madam Mayor, thanks to our careful management and leadership, none of these achievements are at risk. The budget before us tonight continues to deliver our promises, including keeping the council tax low. But, Madam Mayor, there can be no doubt that this is a tough year for Southwark Council. We face growing social care needs for both adults and children, a housing crisis and a failing immigration system, and these are all putting enormous strains on our budgets, as they are on so many local authorities. We estimate that there will be substantial overspends this year, particularly in adult social care. We will need to draw on our contingency budgets and our reserves to see us through 2016-17, and we must take these growing pressures and risks into account as we budget for next year. Madam Mayor, the LGA estimates a national social care funding gap of £2.6 billion by 2020, yet the Conservative government's approach to this crisis is lamentable. They offer us the opportunity to raise an extra 1% on the adult social care precept. Well, that's just £0.9 million here in Southwark, and a one-off grant of £1.6 million, but paid for by cutting our new homes bonus grant, such that we're actually £1 million down on that announcement. Madam Mayor, this year Southwark will suffer the largest funding cut in London, £15 million, and as I said earlier, a 3% adult social care precept will only raise £2.7 million. So, Madam Mayor, tonight in our budget, I am proposing that we increase the net budget for adult social care by £6 million, that we continue to protect the children's social care budget at £50 million, and that we budget for an additional £2 million to protect destitute families and individuals with no recourse to public funds. Adding in other pressures like IT, national insurance, increases to our own business rates, inflation, of course, we must allow for £26.3 million of budgetary pressures. This year, I'm glad to say, though, we are able to bring forward plans for continuing reforms and efficiencies that will enable us to make £18.9 million reductions in our spending. We're also seeing the real benefits from our investment in regeneration, employment and business support, alongside the excellent performance of our award-winning revenue collection service. As a result, we're able to include £12 million of additional income from council tax and business rates next year, as well as £2.5 million of income generation from a range of chargeable services. However, we are still having to put forward £5.1 million of savings which will impact on services. We've carefully benchmarked our spending and services against other boroughs, and we had to propose that most of these savings will come from areas of adult social care where our current spending is considerably greater than other similar boroughs. But all of this is not enough to counterbalance the government funding cuts and the budget pressures. Having weighed up the options of deeper cuts to services and the consultation results last year, we've decided to put forward a 1.99% increase in council tax, the first increase in 7 years. Even with this increase, Southwark's council tax will remain one of the lowest in London and lower in real terms than in both 2010 and 2014. Madam Mayor, tonight I also need to talk about risk. The budget we're putting forward tonight is a carefully worked through, prudent budget. It relies on thought-through estimates and assumptions about income and spend next year. But, as we've seen this year, it's one thing to set out a budget and quite another to deliver it. Our Budget Recovery Board that we established last autumn will continue to meet in 2017-18 to monitor spend and progress on budget reduction projects in adults, children and public health services. Our regular budget monitoring reports to Cabinet will this year also be received by Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But it isn't just spend we need to monitor carefully. We also need to keep a close eye on income. We need to be alert to some really significant risks. This year, universal credit is rolling out across Southwark. We know that alongside a fundamental shift to the way benefits are paid, the change will also further reduce the income of many of our poorer residents. And we are already seeing an impact on rent collection, particularly for temporary accommodation, and we need to keep a close eye out for any impact on council tax income. We're also mindful of the potential impact of business rate revaluation. Many Southwark businesses, particularly in SE1, will see significant increases in their business rate bills this year, of which I need to be clear, not a penny of that comes to be retained by Southwark Council. We are indeed ourselves having to pay a larger bill. Now, I'm sure all members will have heard the warnings of businesses and political leaders about the impact this could have on businesses. If the Chancellor continues to listen but not to act, then businesses may well have to close or relocate and our business rate income could fall. Madam Mayor, no budget speech could be complete this year without a mention of Brexit. The impact that Brexit will have on the London economy, both in terms of businesses and growth, is as yet unknown. But members must be aware that any significant impact on the economy, particularly on London's financial services sector, will also impact on Southwark, on businesses, on investment and on employment. Our income and the demands on our services could be significantly impacted. Madam Mayor, in making our budget proposals, Cabinet has considered these risks, and we have taken the advice of the Strategic Director of Finance and Governance. This is a serious budget that is not without risk, but which is prudent and one which we can have confidence in. I'm afraid that is in stark contrast to the foolish budget proposed by the Liberal Democrats. A budget which hangs on unsustainable high-risk assumptions on council tax income far in excess of the recommendations of the Section 151 officer. At a time when our reserves are dwindling, their budget proposals would put Southwark's financial stability and ultimately our most important public services at serious risk. This irresponsible approach to the Council's finances comes as no surprise. Since 2010, every Lib Dem alternative budget has included some foolish proposal or another. Last year, in fact every previous year, the Lib Dems have sought to slash the contingency budget. If the Lib Dems had their way, 12.9 million would have been taken out of contingencies over the years, and our reserves would by now stand at dangerously low levels. But, Madam Mayor, while they are consistent in their financial irresponsibility, they are decidedly inconsistent about their views on council tax. A few weeks back at Ovian Scrutiny, they were asking me if I would consider a referendum on a far larger council tax increase. Last week, they were telling the Southwark News we should have increased the council tax last year as well as this year. This week, they're saying it should be frozen. 3 positions in just 3 weeks. What will they be saying next week? Now, in contrast, I certainly can't accuse the Conservative group of being inconsistent. Madam Mayor, we have before us tonight the annual Conservative cut-and-paste budget amendment, nigh on identical to all previous dullish Tory amendments. So to save time, if you could just think back to my comments from last year and the year before and the year before, we'll just leave it at that. Madam Mayor, turning back to the substantive matters, these are difficult times for local government. We face continuing government funding cuts, major demand pressures, and there are serious risks on the horizon. We must make tough choices, but we must also stay positive and forward-looking. Southwark and Southwark Council remain strong, but we will only stay that way if we act wisely and responsibly to protect our financial position and our vital public services. I ask all members to support our budget proposals tonight so that we can continue to be optimistic, we can continue to grow, and we can continue to deliver a fairer future for all in Southwark.
The majority opposition spokesperson to respond, Councillor McCallum. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's my pleasure to respond on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Before I get into the substantive matters, I'd first like to echo the Cabinet member's comments about the wider unprecedented crisis facing local government finance in general, and in particular her concerns about the need for increased funding for adult social care, and her group's concerns about the damaging and disproportionate impact of the new schools funding formula. I'm sure I speak for every councillor in this chamber when I say that I hope beyond hope that the government and the Chancellor in his budget next month will address these issues. In the meantime, I'm pleased to say that the Liberal Democrat Group will support Labour Amendment A, and would, in principle, support the utilisation of the 3%, support the utilisation of the 3% adult social care precept. However, we cannot and will not support Labour's irresponsible council tax hike. This regressive form of tax, which takes no account of income and is based purely on a quarter-century old property valuation, threatens local residents with an increase almost 4 times this year's rate of inflation. And it comes at a moment when our most vulnerable residents are also hit with rising utility bills, benefit cuts and service charge increases. Labour's council tax hike stands in stark contrast to their 2014 manifesto to keep council tax low. For many residents, this rise is not low, it's not affordable, and it is certainly not fair. We've already heard that Labour will justify this regressive tax hike by speaking emotively about the urgent need to support adult social care in our borough. This would be credible if it weren't so hypocritical. I'm talking about your plan to simultaneously slash £4.25 million, the biggest frontline cut this year, from vital services for the elderly, disabled and those with learning disabilities. Others in our group will speak about the heartbreaking impact this will have on our most vulnerable residents, but I will simply say this. It is wrong, it is unjustifiable, and we will not support it. Labour's cuts and council tax hike is set against the backdrop of a completely uninspiring, uncreative and unambitious budget for savings or revenue generation. Instead of cutting frontline services, we should be cutting contract costs, cabinet member SRAs and the council's self-aggrandising propaganda machine, aka the Southwark Life. Instead of hitting residents' council tax bills, we should be finding new, innovative and equitable ways of increasing revenue. It is telling, Madam Mayor, that the administration is only attempting to raise £2.5 million in additional income this year. That's just 1/10 of that which they achieved in 2016-17. Their salami slicing approach to budget making is beginning to run out of steam. Previously delayed hard choices are now coming home to roost. But there is another way. Our amendment seeks to balance the books by reducing council waste, increasing developers' fees and making polluters pay. Southwark Lib Dems are fighting the corner of local residents. We will stop Labour's attack on services to the vulnerable and instead work with service users, the voluntary sector and the NHS to design alternative proposals. We will fight for a cleaner, greener Southwark, reversing Labour's £16 bulky waste collection charge and instead fining those who illegally dump waste in our borough. We will secure 1 in 3 genuinely affordable homes, reversing Labour's cuts to the planning team and ensuring that the planning department is working for Southwark residents. Our amendment is forward-thinking and avoids Labour's lazy, painful and unnecessary attack on the back pockets of local residents. And before Labour continue to spur their predictable line that this is unworkable, untried or unrealistic, I would put on the record that their own finance director has confirmed that this budget alternative is legal, it is balanced and it is implementable. And I'd like to also take this moment to thank officers for their help in preparing our budget amendment over the last couple of months. Finally, Madam Mayor, I want to close by referring to Liberal Democrats Amendment D. Putting party politics aside, I hope that we would all share the same sense of shock and sadness at the present upheaval in many parts of the world. As public servants, we owe a moral duty to the refugees who have been driven out of their homes, forgotten about in makeshift camps, and are now seeking to build new lives here in our community. Today, all councillors in this room have an opportunity to do something amazing, to make a small personal sacrifice that will literally change the lives of others. I will be voting for Amendment D with pride, and I hope that every councillor in this chamber will join me. Thank you.
Thank you. There are 4 amendments to the report. So what we're going to do is to take those 4 amendments one after the other, and then we'll have a joint debate at the end on all of it. Okay, so I've made a note of those who've already showed. Just seen David, Councillor Noakes as well, and Adele. So we'll start with Councillor Catherine Rose to move Amendment A.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Last month, Laura McInnery, editor of Schools Week, wrote the following in The Guardian. School crises are less visual. No one photographs the child with learning difficulty, sobbing as the teaching assistant they worked with for the past 3 years is booted out. No one sees the cuts in music lessons, the special needs children who are told to go somewhere else because the school can't afford to take them, or the extra pupils in a class, or 10. But make no mistake, schools really are heading for a budget crisis. Last year, more than half of secondary schools overspent. The average secondary academy that it was read in the bank had a minus of £363,000. The situation is so dire, the National Audit Office has warned that by 2020 schools will be worse funded than at any time since the mid-90s. The National Audit Office found and demonstrated in its report in December 2016 that there is an 8% real terms reduction in mainstream schools funding, that £3 billion worth of savings need to be met and made by 2019 to 2020 to counteract current cost pressures, that 60% of secondary schools spent more than their income in 2014-2015. When asked how the £3 billion worth of cuts would be achieved, the DfE stated that £1.3 billion would be found in procurement spending and £1.7 billion would be found in workforce spending. This means an end to more books, more things, more teachers, more assistants. There is no capacity or resilience within the school system to cope with these cuts. Only today, Sir David Amis, the Tory MP for Southend West, warned Nick Gibb in a debate in Parliament that this is the government's poll tax. And I agree with him. He demonstrated that he and other Tories were going to refuse to support this legislation. I refuse to accept it as a ward councillor that the 2 schools in my ward, Dulwich Wood Primary, should face decimating cuts when the school has worked so hard to achieve a solid, good rating with its Ofsted appraisal recently, and it has excellent SAT results last summer. I also refuse to accept that Kingsdale will lose in excess of £1 million a year, over £1,000 per pupil, and will see the loss potentially of 30 teachers or the equivalent cost reductions elsewhere. I refuse to accept it as a parent that our children are the generation that will be deemed to be worth less than previous ones. We know what this will mean to cuts, and we know what it will mean to school life. Poorer attainment, less life chances, less joy. I refuse to accept that Jeremy Deller will be the last ever Turner Prize-winning artist to find expression aged 5 in a sandpit or a clay modelling or with paints when he attended St John's St Clement's Primary School. I refuse to accept that Rio Ferdinand will be the last boy to attend Camelot Primary and to find out that in addition to football, he's also good at maths and musical theatre, and that he will go on to captain England and play and represent his country. I also refuse to accept that Gavin Rose will be the last local boy to lead Dulwich Hamlet to FA Cup with glory. And I also refuse to accept that John Boyega will indeed be the last Jedi to come from Oliver Goldsmith's Primary, to go out into the galaxy and to lead a rebellion. So I urge you all to feel the force, join the resistance and fight the cuts.
Councillor Evelyn Akoto to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I heard that the government was working on a fairer funding formula, my reaction was great. Hopefully they will invest the money where it's needed most. I did not for 1 minute imagine that under the guise of fairer funding, the government's intention was only to shift the already inadequate school funding around the country. Schools in London already face unique challenges around deprivation, mobility, a rapid increase in demand for SEND places, and many more. Yet under the proposed national formula, schools in London will have to find a savings of £360 million in the first year, the equivalent of 12,857 qualified teachers. Madam Mayor, the proposed funding formula will disproportionately hit London and will have a damaging impact on schools in Southwark. Southwark schools have had great successes. 93% of our schools are now rated good or outstanding. Cutting funding in such a crucial town would put educational outcomes at risk. Southwark schools are set to lose an average of £1,024 per pupil. In my ward, for example, Pilgrim's Way Primary School will have a deficit of £217, £188 in real terms by 2019. That's a loss of £1,040 loss per pupil, a potential reduction of 4 teachers. This is deeply concerning, but is the impact really hitting home? Maybe not, so let me bring it home right now. I want to give you a glimpse of what is actually happening or what could continue to happen. A school recently reported that they used to spend money on speech therapy, especially in primary, but the numbers of hours had to be cut. The gangs workers has gone. The drugs worker has gone. Their counsellor has had their hours cut. They have a number of students on suicide risk assessment who have attempted suicide either at school or at home. The waiting list is increasing, but they don't have enough capacity. Madam Mayor, as a Deputy Cabinet Member for Young People and Careers, my focus has been on improving the successes we have made, raising aspirations for our most disadvantaged students, getting them career ready for when they leave school, and just giving our children the best life chances possible. But I fear that all the good work will be undone if schools have to now just focus on surviving and making ends meet. Justin Green stated that she wanted every child to have access to a good school place. How can this government harp on about better schools but have no intention in investing in them? The maths just doesn't add up. Make no mistake, this new funding formula will deepen the school budget crisis. So I now call on everyone who want to ensure that our children receive the standard of education they deserve to support this motion.
We now move to Amendment B. Councillor Michael Mitchell to propose.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to be moving this Conservative amendment tonight to the Council's budget for 2017-18. And may I place on record my thanks to Jennifer Seeley and her officers who assisted in providing information for its preparation. Local government, like the other great public services in this country, relies heavily on the government of the day to implement the right policies to encourage growth in the economy, which in turn allows the proceeds of growth to be shared between the public and private sector through levies and fair taxes. George Osborne and now Philip Hammond, as successive Conservative Chancellors of the Exchequer, have brought us back from the devastation left by the last Labour government. But even after more than 6 years of expectations-beating growth, we as a nation are still going to have to add £60 billion to the nation's debt pile at the end of this financial year. A debt which future generations will be burdened with and will have to consider paying back. The drive to balance the books must continue, and this Chancellor, unlike Gordon Brown, understands that you can't abolish boom and bust, and there may be more economic turbulence before we reach a position where we can begin to start paying down the debt. In these difficult times, the Council has shied away from the big partnership agreements with other boroughs, which could have seen really significant savings. Instead, it has done bits here and there in the hope that something might turn up. It would now appear that the present administration is running out of ideas, and when push comes to shove, Labour have reverted to type and decided to honour their discretionary spending pledges rather than keep to their manifesto pledge to freeze council tax. The recent refresh of the Fairer Future principles was a transparent exercise in junking their council tax freeze pledge in favour of an immediate council tax rise. It's worth noting, as it forms part of the bill which will shortly be sent to our taxpayers, that the return of a Labour mayor to City Hall has only added to the woes of the people of Southwark. Instead of the radical ideas and tax-cutting agenda followed by Boris Johnson, we find that Mayor Sadiq Khan, he of the no strikes on TfL, presides over a mounting list of broken promises and is charging us extra for the privilege. If this council was really serious about only spending money as if it was its own personal money, then it would have axed Southwark Life, abandoned its cosy deal with the trade unions, and seriously addressed the issue of merging services with other boroughs. This amendment is a reminder to the people of Southwark that the Labour way is not the only way. A Conservative administration would spend more on improving the environment, more on law and order, and finding new ways of working with our boroughs, neighbours and partners, which would bring time. In short, we want to see the benefits of a long-term economic plan produce a Southwark Council which works for everyone. I commend this amendment to the Council. You have to report.
Councillor Lyons to second Amendment B.
Many thanks, Madam Mayor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in order to second Amendment B. But before I do, I would like to comment further on Amendment A, obviously the one we've just heard, which asks that all Southwark councils support a call to ensure that all Southwark schools remain adequately funded. I'd just like to say, I'd like to reassure colleagues that we are sympathetic to the principles of the argument put forward, though we do believe that some of the numbers and the thinking on this may be somewhat premature, given that I believe the consultation on this matter is open for another month, so we have yet to see any actual numbers or actual figures coming through. But we have already visited 3 schools in our ward to see their views and are very aware of the concerns and would be wanting to put the future of Southwark children ahead of some of those slightly more delicate matters of political affiliation, should it come to that. On the matter of consistency, education is one of the key topics for the residents in the very politically engaged ward that is Village Ward that my colleague Councillor Mitchell and indeed Councillor Kirby represent. And electoral turnouts there are amongst the highest in London, in fact, second only to that chap called Goldsmith, who stood for mayor a year ago. Dulwich Village was the second highest turnout. And accordingly, we will continue to track progress on this particular proposal of funding in schools. Other local topics on which residents of Village Ward focus, hence the consistency of our budget amendments, include security, given its highest burglary rate in the UK, according to moneysupermarket.com. Safety in relation to traffic, particularly for the thousands of children, estimates are 13,000 children coming into the area every day to go to school. And, of course, the fact that Southwark is an age-friendly borough because we have the highest percentage of population over 65 in our ward. It's about 11% in Village compared, for example, to the much younger Surrey Dogs, where the percentage is only about 6.5%. Hence, our focus within our budget amendments are on these areas with proposals for additional policing, highway maintenance, and road sweeping to ensure that the pavements are safe for our older residents. And I would urge you to support this amendment. Finally, though, before I run out of time, I'd like to return to the issue of political engagement in the ward that I referenced earlier. Our residents are extremely engaged, respond to consultations and take the issue of having their voice heard very seriously. They also believe that having had their voice sought, they'd like to make sure it was heard. So I'd like to finish on just saying that the new community council format is yet to work efficiently in this way in terms of having voices heard, that increasingly things to which more than 50% of the locality have objected to are just moving past without a backward glance. So I would end, Madam Mayor, on a plea that Southwark ensure that resident views are not only heard, but seen to be heard, such that people remain engaged in local democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move to Amendment C, and Councillor Rosie Schimmel to propose.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Make no mistake that the Liberal Democrats recognise the really significant challenges posed by the financial settlement handed down from the Conservative government to councils this year, and what a challenge it will have been to the administration of the council and to the finance team to present a balanced budget this evening. It's no secret to anyone in this room that local authorities have had to deal with significant budget cuts in the aftermath of the recession, and that the funding shortfall in adult social care has been an escalating pressure on budgets. This year, the latter in particular has reached an undeniable state of crisis. Age UK have estimated that nearly 1.2 million people aged 65 or over are now missing out on the care and support that they need with essential daily living activities. And we know that each month, thousands of people across the country are being kept in hospitals unnecessarily after they're fit to be discharged because the care and support that they need at home simply isn't there. We are all too aware of these issues, and we're all too aware of the challenges of keeping these essential services afloat in Southwark. But ultimately, and sadly, any solution we put forward here tonight, including the precept, can only be a sticking plaster for what is a huge national crisis. What we desperately need is our colleagues in Westminster, from all parties, to be taking a fundamental look at how we can deliver a more sustainable settlement for funding and providing health and care services in particular in the long term. The government's current attempt to address this problem through the precept is, I'm sure we can all agree, woefully inadequate, although I don't deny that it's essential for Southwark to take forward this year. However, it's widely accepted that across the country this can only raise 900 million, while the gap in adult social care funding alone is creeping rapidly towards 1.3 billion. That's to say nothing of the postcode lottery for services, which this precept further entrenches, with more affluent areas self-evidently being able to raise more than their less well-off neighbours. But the really distressing thing, as things stand currently, is that this incredibly bleak future for social care and for all the essential public services which we deliver as a council looks set only to get worse. As Councillor Collins said, no debate on the budget this evening would be complete without a mention of Brexit. We have a government which is pushing the UK towards a hard Brexit, taking us out of the single market and endangering the financial stability across the country. And we and the communities we represent and all the services that we work so hard to deliver will pay the price. And unfortunately, we have a Labour opposition in Westminster who seems to be doing next to nothing to challenge them on this, and nothing on a national scale to really make the case for why this will be so devastating for health and care and other local government services. The personal and financial impact of the government's approach to Brexit looks set to further decimate care services at great personal and financial cost, and which will make future budgets for us here in Southwark, I fear, look all the more difficult. I would urge members on all sides of the chamber to make our voices heard to our colleagues in Westminster to make sure they know the impact we will feel here.
Councillor Ben Johnson to second Amendment C.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to start by adding my support as well for the 3% rise in council tax for adult social care. It's hugely important that we protect the most vulnerable people in our society. But I support this reluctantly because others have said this is a ruse from the Tory government to hide the scale of its own mismanagement of adult social care and the NHS in forcing councils to raise the cash themselves. But it's no surprise because, as others have said, this government has one overriding mission: to pull us out of the EU at all costs, make a total mess of Brexit, which will make all of this funding situation worse. And we all know that the NHS would collapse without immigration, all that immigrants bring to our country and to Southwark. But I support the 3% rise. However, I cannot support, will not support, and the party opposite should not support the extra 1.99% increase in council tax. Because council tax is a regressive tax, Madam Mayor. It is a regressive tax that hits the poor hardest. And I think we should listen to the words of somebody widely respected across the chamber, the leader of the Labour Party. I got a great book of Corbyn quotes for Christmas. I'd encourage you all to read it. He said there is a case for land value taxation to replace the regressive system of council tax during one of his leadership elections. It's hard to believe that the members opposite disagree with Jeremy Corbyn. And it's very, very hard to imagine. And if they disagree, then why are Labour raising council tax? Well, I'll tell you why in 3 simple words: incompetence, mismanagement, waste. There is no need, Madam Mayor, for this increase, this huge hike in council tax, which is on top of an increase in the service charge for council tenants. It's on top of the £16 fly tipping tax. It's on top of the new charge to use for the housing repairs line, which used to be free. You are bleeding our residents dry. And we have presented a carefully balanced budget, the theme of which is fairness. A fairer future, if you like. A fairer future for adult social care by increasing funding. A fairer future for those blighted by fly tipping, by scrapping the charge. A fairer future for the poor by not increasing this regressive tax. Labour have shown, yet again, they overspend, underdeliver, they cannot be trusted with our money. Now they want to make the poor of Southwark pay for their incompetence. Well, it's not too late. You can still support our amendment, discover the radical socialist Corbynista within you, and vote for Amendment C.
Okay, we'll move on to Amendment D. Hang on. Yeah, Councillor Nudas-Hamrai to move Amendment D.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I feel very scared about politics at the moment. As a woman, as someone who's half Iraqi, and as a Liberal with liberal values about fellow human beings. But I also feel really motivated and angry and more determined than ever to protect and give a voice for the most vulnerable residents in this borough. Throughout history, it is the different who are persecuted, the disabled, the immigrants, the minorities, the ones who cannot speak loudly and who are easy targets. And that is why it is the job of all Liberals to be the voice for those people, to make those voices of minorities heard. And so what can we all do? Communities here in Southwark will feel the impact of the decisions that we make in this room this evening. They are the ones to whom we need to send the loudest and strongest message. Not just to our refugee communities, but to all the residents of this borough who are currently stunned and terrified about what feels like a global march towards nationalism and fascism. We must fight against that, and we all have a duty to fight against that. That's why Liberal Democrat councillors are saying that those councillors in this borough who receive extra special allowances, and I am one of them, should take a pay cut to support refugees. Gestures are important. This is a powerful and united gesture, which, as well as reassuring people, will also make a real financial difference to refugee community groups on the ground. Labour have complained that it's political. It is political. It is deeply, symbolically and significantly about the kind of politics we want in this borough. I'm here tonight because I want our politicians to put aside differences and to be progressive, to put our money where our mouths are. So I really hope Labour will put aside the frustration that this wasn't their idea and support this simple amendment. I'm afraid it might not happen because I'm afraid that some complacency has set in Southwark. Hopefully I'm wrong, but there is some evidence. No councillor pay cuts, despite costly additional cabinet posts and golden goodbyes. Adults with learning disabilities literally sold out to developers and increasing council tax instead of cutting waste and making polluters pay. This would be bad at any time, but over the last 12 months we need local politics in Southwark to be less greedy and arrogant and to protect those vulnerable minorities that we say we care about. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor James Oxon, Second Amendment D.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've seen tonight, there are many areas where the different political parties in this chamber disagree on what the council should be doing and how we should be doing it. And that's how it should be. It's a sign of a very healthy and vibrant democracy, where opposing views can be heard without fear that by disagreeing we put ourselves or those we love in danger. However, we know that not everyone is lucky enough to live in a country where robust debate is welcomed rather than punished. And sometimes I think we can all agree on what we can all agree on is that when people who are fleeing war, persecution or poverty find a safe haven with us in Southwark, it is in everyone's best interest to help them build stable and successful lives in our borough. That's why the Liberal Democrats welcome the Council's plans for resettling Syrian refugee families in Southwark, ensuring that they get the dedicated support that they need for their first 5 years in the UK. But as the report notes, we also need to maximise opportunities to work in partnership with the voluntary sector to ensure that these families are supported every step of the way. And of course, there are these five families from Syria only represent a small proportion of people who come every year to Southwark from other countries in search for a better life. We are rightly proud of this, and the fact that Southwark is one of the most diverse boroughs in the UK is also something to be proud of. But in the past year, it seems like attitudes both at home and abroad have hardened towards refugees and migrants as a whole, from all countries as well. I'm sure I'm not the only one worried and depressed by the news. We've all heard it. Trump's ban on Muslims, the repeal of the Dubs Amendment Scheme, the Muslim ban, Brexit, and the rise of hate crimes that have come with it. The list goes on. This is why I'm asking the Council Assembly to come together and take a stand against division and hatred by supporting this amendment. Just a 4.99% cut in councillors' special responsibility allowances will free up money to support Southwark Refugee Communities Forum's refugee campaign over the next year. They will deliver a targeted integration programme for refugees in Southwark, based on recommendations of my Welcome report and the first-hand knowledge of the support that refugees need. The SRCF will also work with local service providers to help them better understand the needs of refugees and support refugees to make their voices heard. This is very important work, and it's work that can be delivered more effectively and efficiently by refugee community organisations rather than the Council itself. Supporting this amendment will not only provide real support where it's most needed, it will send a strong message of solidarity from members of this Council to refugee and migrant communities in Southwark. Please join me in rejecting the message of division and hatred, affirming that the Council Assembly believes that all Southwark residents are welcome here and supporting this amendment to make that welcome a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a very long list of people who wish to contribute, the first of which was Councillor Barber, who's just leaving the chamber, so I shall move on to Councillor Mark Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't realise it was so far up the list. My first comment is to Councillor Ben Johnson, and, talk so fervently in support of our leader is more than welcome to cross the floor and join the 500,000 members of Western Europe's biggest political party any day now. So, Madam Mayor, as we've heard, these are difficult times, but in Southwark we have a lot to be proud of. the biggest new council house building programme in the country. New leisure centre opened at the Elephant and Castle. The Castle Leisure Centre now had over 200,000 visits since it opened last year. And our new libraries at Camberwell, which is open and going really well, on the Aylesbury, which got planning permission late last year, and Canada Water Library, which is up for the Mayor's Planning Award on Monday at City Hall for the best scheme 5 years on. Lot to be proud of in Southwark. Here. You're very welcome. Now, the regeneration and investment into Southwark means that we have more new homes and we have more new businesses. And as Councillor Colley has already mentioned, that's the best part of £12 million of additional income we'll have next year from new council tax and from the business rates that we get to keep. And this has helped to keep and protect our frontline services. Imagine the decisions that would be in front of us this evening if we didn't have that additional income. Now, most of those have been generated from schemes that are often opposed by the opposition. But Southwark Labour, by working with residents, will continue to get the right schemes and will continue to see this additional revenue long into the future. Now, just on the opposition plans, we've already significantly increased fees on developers. We've also made savings in the planning department, but these are predominantly in admin, unlike the claims made in their proposed budget amendment. And our planning department has an excellent performance, and the delay on building new homes in this borough and indeed across London isn't down to the planning system. In London there are 500,000 homes that have got planning permission. It's other problems in the housing market which this budget won't do anything to solve. And indeed, not only are we up for the award for Canada Water on Monday, but Southwark's shortlisted for the best planning borough in London next week because we deliver such a good high service to our residents. And on consultation, that is, as the members know, for the council schemes paid for out of our capital budget, which isn't in front of us this evening, and it's developers that should be paying for their own consultation with residents rather than it coming from the council's budget. We obviously run the statutory planning process, so they've got a very confused amendment and don't really seem to understand how the council works. So, hopefully, we'll get cross-party support for the ongoing investment into our borough, and that will continue in the run-up to next year's elections, and that the members opposite will start voting for some schemes that are coming in and start voting for some of the schemes that are paying for much-needed new council homes in our borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Schimmer, you've been. Councillor Livingston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You only have to turn on the news at the moment to hear of councils up and down the land that are facing extraordinary pressures on their adult care services. We heard talk earlier about Surrey County Council. Surrey County Council's scale of cuts they've had from government are a third ahead that we faced here in Southwark, and yet they've been talking about a 15% increase in council tax. Haringey Council, another council that has had less cuts than Southwark, were reporting in the Municipal Journal just 2 weeks ago £12 million deficit in our adult care budget alone. So even more than here in Southwark, where the figure is 7.5. So whilst we're not alone in facing extraordinary adult budget cuts, we still need to get on top of that situation and ensure it's properly managed. And so I'm really pleased that this budget allows us the time to do that. We have a net increase, after all the savings in adult care are taken into account, of £6 million in this budget to buy us that much-needed time to ensure that we can make the proper transformation of services to ensure that people who receive adult care services are safe. That new money is there to ensure that there's better integration of health and social care. There is £2.7 million of new commitments in this budget to support our most vulnerable residents. There is money to ensure that our ethical care charter is spread further to ensure that people who receive our home care services and the people who deliver them are treated more fairly. But we can't get away from the fact that this is the council that spends the highest amount of any council in the land on learning disabilities. We can't get away from the fact that when it comes to spend per head amongst comparative boroughs, we have the second highest cost per person in terms of our care service, in terms of services delivered. And whilst I agree with, actually, I thought Councillor Schimmel's contribution was very good. I agree with every word that she said, pretty much, except perhaps about our parliamentary party. I do think the charge that was made by by Councillor Johnson about mismanagement seems a little strange, or I'm not sure they actually believe it, or at least have thought it through. Because if they did think that, then surely the first question you would be asking is, so how are you going to put that right? And instead, the Liberal Democrats' question is, so why are you trying to put it right? And that is the problem with their budget. This is complete irresponsibility. This isn't addressing the real issues that we have to face. And let us recall, budget after budget, the Lib Dems opposing the sensible decisions about contingency budgets and reserves and trying to have unfundable council tax cuts, all of which would have meant that we didn't have the financial resilience to deal with the situation we currently face. Voting for an irresponsible budget with council tax collection increases, after, of course, them being the worst council in London when they run the council and council collection. They don't know how to live it. It's irresponsible. We need to vote for this budget.
We just lose track of time altogether, and I don't like to go time when members are speaking, but it would be nice if it was fair. So if maybe in future we can have automatic microphones cutting. No, I'm not blaming you, but I'm saying, Lucy, maybe microphones could try and get cut automatically when the time's up. It's a helpful suggestion.
Thank you.
Just making this
Councillor Mills.
Madam Mayor. This is a budget that, as we set tonight, absolutely, it's difficult to feel proud because of the really, really difficult and challenging budget settlement that we face. But I am proud that we continue to ring-fence £50 million worth of budget for children's social care. And I am proud that every time residents tell us they want us to protect our children, they want us to protect spending on our young people, that yet again we have been able to do that. And that is in the face of immense and growing pressures, whether that is in children's social care or whether that is the very rapid increase in pressure in terms of our special educational needs budget. I am proud as well that we continue to protect our children's centres, that our early help team remains protected, that the amazing work our school improvement team does day in, day out with our schools yet again has been protected. But on that last one, we know that this year we've been able to protect that work because yet again our schools forum, our schools have come together and said they will help us out, just as they have every year since 2010. But what we absolutely need to recognise is that we may find a way of working together over the next year to protect ESG and what ESG does here at Southwark. What we will not be able to protect is the impact of the national funding formula proposals if they are driven through as currently on the table. That is up to £1,000 worth of funding each year for every pupil in Southwark that we could see lost by 2019. This is unprecedented. This is £28 million worth of funding to our schools. How on earth can we find a way to protect that? We absolutely need to be fighting those cuts, and I welcome the comments that I think I heard from the Tories opposite, and I hope you do join us in voting for Amendment A this evening. I also want to make clear that when it comes to refugees, when it comes to EU citizens, that here at the Council we stand absolutely ready to do our fair share, whether that's Dublin children, whether that's Dubs children, whether that's other unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We expect to play our part as part of the agreed National Transport Scheme. And I am delighted to hear that Councillor Al-Samurai has rediscovered her Liberal voice. But I ask her this: where was it for 5 years when you sat around a cabinet table and your party pushed through the cuts that have decimated our communities, that have left our communities disaffected, and which have seen this right-wing surge that we have seen here and in the state affect us, whether we are left-wing or whether we are Liberal?
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Can I just remind everybody, I am the chair and I will call time, so please keep an eye on the clock and I will call time at the end of your 3 minutes. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the last Council Assembly meeting in November, we voted on a motion which claimed that this administration was planning to deliver a sustainable transport system in Southwark, but neither sustainability nor transport are mentioned in Labour's proposed budget. The Lib Dem budget amendment, by contrast, contains bold proposals to reduce the number of cars on the road, get traffic in Southwark moving, reduce pollution and improve air quality. What's more, these proposals will help the Council generate income by making polluters pay. That's why the Liberal Democrats would pilot a scheme which charges a fee to large private employers who provide parking spaces for their staff. Since this was introduced in Nottingham, car journeys in the city have fallen and congestion and air quality have improved. What's more, it also makes the Council an amazing £9 million a year in additional revenue. Why then is Southwark lagging behind us? Why aren't we learning from best practice elsewhere? Why isn't the Council using the powers it has to tackle pollution and raise money? I'll tell you why. Because the Labour administration spends too much time playing the victim and blaming the government and not enough time taking responsibility to solve the problem. But not only are Labour not innovative in this area, they're not even taking action to enforce their own existing policies. The Council hasn't issued a single fine to drivers who leave their engines running while they are parked, even though this is a major cause of pollution. But it's not just about getting people out of their cars and into greener forms of transport. It's also about changing behaviour and making sure that vehicles on the road are as clean as possible. That's why the Lib Dems would encourage people to switch to low-emission vehicles by introducing a diesel surcharge for the most polluting vehicles and resident parking permits based on engine emissions. Other inner London boroughs, such as Islington, Camden, Lambeth, Westminster and Richmond, already do this or are about to. In fact, Labour in Southwark were proposing to do this in last year's budget, but it got quietly shelved. Now they say it's unworkable. But if other boroughs can make it work, and we thought it could last year, why can't we do it now? We can't wait any longer to tackle air pollution and develop a vision for truly sustainable transport in Southwark. That's why I ask you to support the Lib Dem budget amendment. We need to remember that the majority of Southwark residents don't actually drive a car, but they suffer the effects of cars. It's time that the Council took bold and decisive action to improve our environment and make those who choose to pollute pay. This is a fairer way, rather than hitting everyone with an unfair council tax rise.
Councillor Johnson Situ.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As colleagues have also mentioned from both sides of the aisle, actually, today is going to be a tough decision. We're going to have to take tough decisions today. But it's important we highlight some of the investments we've made over the last year. And as my councillor colleague and other cabinet members have said, we have made a number of investments. We've continued to protect libraries and even invested in Nunhead Library. We've continued our protection of leisure centres and opened up a new one in Castle Leisure Centre. We supported residents access jobs, and it's good to hear that we've been nominated and won a number of awards for that as well. Madam Mayor, though, I would like to draw Council Assembly on a number of proposed savings from the Lib Dems across. Going through the Lib Dem amendments, their proposal is to save 25% on our cleaning, repairs and security contracts. I don't have to stress how important value for money is to us as a council. We always seek to ensure we get value for money. We even go beyond that and we posted it up on the walls. Our Fairer Future promise to spend every penny like it was our own. However, we also recognise the wider social values we get from our contracts. So when we negotiate contracts, we ensure staff are being paid the London living wage. We ensure that there are apprenticeship opportunities, and we ensure that our partners recognise our safer cycling pledge. So when the Lib Dems propose savings on our contracts, what they're really saying is that they're willing to compromise on our values, and quite frankly, we're not. They propose ceasing publication of Southwark Life magazine. I would like to hear them say that to the people who reviewed our apprenticeship offer in the last edition, or the local junior doctor that was covered as part of our Raising Aspiration campaign. Finally, Madam Mayor, I'll be honest, I'm disappointed. I'll explain why. The Lib Dems are also proposing a levy on bars and pubs. I always thought they tried to pitch themselves as a liberal cool party. I'm concerned this will hurt their image. Now, of course, we need to find the balance between residents and revellers and nighttime economy. This administration has sought to balance the needs of residents by targeting our work in key hotspots. But we won't do that by putting pubs out of business. I want to challenge this false dilemma being painted by the Lib Dems between residents and revellers. We know if you pop into a pub in Peckham or a bar in Bermondsey, you'll see a number of people who have travelled in for the evening, but the vast majority will be Southwark residents. Madam Mayor, this levy, like many of their proposals, is ill-judged and will potentially put businesses who are already struggling as a result of the business rate re-evaluation out of business and further at risk. This is why this levy is to protect...
Thank you, Councillor Sutton.
Just to end on this note, they will say this levy is to protect residents. Really, it's a tax on fun.
Councillor Carl Easton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I remember saying in my first speech to Council Assembly that the borough doesn't have the opposition that it deserves. If we look at the alternative budget, a few pages of poorly drafted rubbish, which takes all of the easy options. There's a lot of politics in there, isn't there? But there's not very much economics. A lot of easy options. The easy option of freezing council tax. Have they got any idea of the financial situation that the council finds itself in? Have they tried to engage with it in any kind of constructive way, or have they just gone for a line on a leaflet? I was going to say, do they credit the people of this borough with any intelligence? But actually, it's quite difficult to understand their position. I didn't realise until about 10 minutes ago. They're going to raise council tax in their amendments because there's no money for adult social care, and they're going to freeze it in their budget amendment because it's unfair. The 3%, Councillor Schimmel said, is woefully inadequate, and Councillor Johnson says that the 2% is due to incompetence and waste. And Councillor Samarai said in the paper that we should have been raising it year on year. Councillor Johnson knows it's a regressive tax. If it's so regressive, will he vote against Amendment D, which calls for an increase in the collection rate? Is it not also regressive in some of their proposals to do things like roll out an emissions-based parking scheme? I think it's the richest people in the borough who have private parking and can afford a Prius, and the poorest people who have to pay for an emissions-based parking scheme on their estate. So let's, this progressive thing is slightly confused from the Lib Dems. People here know what the Tories are doing, and they want an opposition that engages with that. A Tory government that their party too quickly jumped into bed with in Southwark until 2010 and nationally from 2010 till 2015. Another easy option, cutting councillors' allowances. It looks good on a leaflet, but it's a poorly thought out proposal that saves £29,000. Do they know the scale of the challenges which face us? I'm not sure that they do. The Lib Dems are fiddling while Rome burns, and at the same time the Tories are cutting the fire service. There's a lot of politics here, but not very much economics. I would urge everyone to vote for a budget that is pragmatic, painful, but pragmatic and practical, and deals with the issues that are facing the borough rather than the political priorities of the Liberal Democrats. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Air pollution is a major threat to public health across urban areas in the UK and beyond. Scientific studies increasingly highlight the substantial risks associated with the toxins released from vehicles on busy roads. One such study from the Royal College of Physicians had estimated that around 40,000 people per year die in the UK alone as a result of air pollution. A report from the Times last week suggested that living on a busy road has the equivalent effect of passively smoking 10 cigarettes per day. The London Mayor's announcement of the introduction from October this year of a so-called T-charge on high-polluting vehicles that drive through the congestion zone should be welcomed, yet it doesn't go far enough. Many of Southwark's roads which fall outside the congestion zone pose a continuing and severe threat to the pedestrians and cyclists that traverse them, and the residents that live along them. Take Old Kent Road, a major artery in South London's road network, but also a silent killer. According to London Air, a pollution monitoring website, Old Kent Road's pollution levels were determined to be dangerously high for 2 full days already in 2017, with the average nitrogen dioxide levels being almost 50% higher than the 2017 target. This is why the Liberal Democrats are calling upon this Labour administration to do more. We want to balance the books while making polluters pay. As Councillor O'Brien has already rightly said, this can be achieved through 2 primary measures. Firstly, we want the Council to use its existing powers to issue fixed penalty notices against drivers that leave their vehicle engines running. And secondly, we strongly urge the Council to adopt an emissions-based residential parking permit scheme where cars that pollute more pay more. As an aside, it is also important to note the vital role that international institutions such as the EU play in the battle against air pollution. As Liberal Democrats, we continue to strongly advocate the importance of the European Union and champion the role of internationalism in protecting our environment and public health. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the Labour Party, whose shambolic and incoherent response to Brexit has made a mockery of their alleged role as the official opposition to this Tory government. We therefore call on the local Labour Party to get your act together and make a point of tackling air pollution a priority of this borough. Thank you.
Councillor Kieran Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I would just like to say thank you for myself, and I'm sure all of us want to join me in this, in thanking all the officers who've been involved in the enormous amount of work that goes into these budgets, not just of officers of the Council, but of all the organisations that deliver services on behalf of the Council, so my many thanks to them. I was going to say, I think opposition is obviously a very good thing, and it is, in principle, a great thing to have opposition parties presenting alternative ideas, but I've just been disappointed today, I have to say, really, in the quality of what's being put forward to us. I'm not going to go through the things I said I'd do in detail, because my colleague, Carl particularly, has said it all. But really, the savings just don't add up from the Lib Dems. They talk about saving £900,000 from council tax, increasing the rates, yet they're the opposition party, or when they were in power, that had one of the worst collection rates in London. And Southwark is now lauded for how we achieve it. I'm not sure what they think they're trying to do there. They want to make registration fees and our registry offices fairer by increasing the cost of them by £100,000 in total. Where's the fairness in that? So let me leave the Lib Dems at that for the moment. Really, I want to talk about the other party in this chamber, the Tories. The Tories. Now, the Tories nationally claim that they're a party that wants to make our country work for everyone. But this is the party that has taken over £100 million off this council over the last few years, money that's taken from all of our Southwark residents, while at the same time they're very happy to make deals, as has already been said, with their Conservative-led councils in other parts of the country in secret. At least they make them in secret, but then they send them to one of the leaders of the Labour group nationally. Very interesting behaviour. The Tories, who at the moment want to increase business rates in our borough, they claim to be the organisation, the party of business, but actually the kind of increases in business rates that we're going to see here put our businesses at risk and put jobs of people in this borough at risk. The Tories who said, in amongst all their slashing and burning, that they would protect schools and they would protect the NHS, we now know that they plan to reduce funding for the next 2 years on the NHS per head of population, and that for schools, our Southwark schools, has already been said, they want to cut funding by £1,000 per pupil. £1,000 for a pupil, that's an extraordinary amount of money, and that can only do harm. And as Councillor Mills said, that means cutting funding for teaching staff in our schools. And last of all, no, let me finish. I think I've run out of time.
Thank you.
The Conservatives
Councillor Williams.
are not a party that are looking out for the people of Southwark. They are a party that just want to make good for the rich interests that their party represents.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members will be excited to hear that I'm going to be speaking about some budget scrutiny recommendations later. But before that, I do want to touch on some issues relating to the Tory government in Westminster. Madam Mayor, what a shower they are. 8 years of vicious cuts. Third of Southwark's budget gone. Total failure to address the crisis in funding in social care, a precept they allow councils to put up, which is nowhere near enough to plug the gap. We've got a self-made school funding crisis. The current government proves yet again the truth of a mantra that I and many other people in this room grew up with. Never, ever, ever trust a Tory government. It is a lesson, let us not forget, that Southwark Lib Dems and the former MP for Bermondsey Old Southwark had to learn the hard way. Let's hope they never have to learn it again. And with that in mind, I'd like to turn to some scrutiny recommendations.
Brilliant.
Seamless.
Segue.
Absolutely seamless. I just want to highlight 3 of those recommendations, if I may. First of all is about the monitoring the delivery of those social care savings that we're making in this year's budget. It's absolutely crucial that we keep to that, and that's why I think it's important that both Overview and Scrutiny and Councillor Rebecca Lurie's subcommittee play a crucial role in publicly holding the Council to account on delivering those. Secondly, on NHS accessibility rules to manage public health spending to reduce unnecessary costs. It's absolutely crucial, once again, that we encourage service users to use more cost-effective services that are Southwark-based rather than more expensive services. That is going to be an important way of us saving money in the future. And thirdly, the review of the voluntary redundancy policy at the Council to make sure that it is also being accessed by the low-paid staff as well as others. And I welcome the constructive way in which those recommendations have been engaged with by the Cabinet. I just want to finish by saying that I'm pleased and proud that this Labour Council continues to strike the very difficult balance in a very difficult situation between principle and financial responsibility, and I hope that all members will vote for this budget. Thank you.
Councillor Limpeth Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We all know that there is a crisis in adult social care in this country. That's why the Liberal Democrat budget includes a proposal to increase the adult social care budget. We also know that when there is less money to go around, hard decisions need to be made. The Liberal Democrats believe that these decisions should be made with the people who are most affected in an open and transparent way. So we oppose the plan to consolidate their services into a single day centre, and to do this by merging without any consultation with the people who use the existing day centres in Southwark, the Riverside Day Centre and the Queen's Road Centre. The Camden Society, who run these day centres and lease the buildings from the Council, first heard of this plan when the Council Property Department sent out a letter a few weeks ago giving them notice of their leasing ending. Now the Council are saying they will work with the Camden Society to find a solution. But why on earth did they do that before they telling them the building will close? We say that it's significant that in November of last year, Council officers met with developers at an event called Site Match to discuss sites for development in Southwark, including 40 sites to be built on the site of the Riverside Day Centre. We say that the needs of severely disabled people must be placed ahead of developers' needs. These daycare centers are literally a lifeline for people with learning disabilities. One lady told us about her 41-year-old daughter who has Downs and whose OCD means that routine is simply the most important thing for her. 2 years ago, her daughter had no social life. She didn't talk or mix, and yet a Riverside Center, by treating her like a human being, has supported her to communicate with others for the first time in her life. Change can be distressing for many of us, but for people with learning disabilities, it can be actively harmful. We heard from a mother whose 22-year-old son, who cannot speak or wash himself, has spent 4 months self-harming after a change in his transport routine. This is why the Liberal Democrat budget would delay the implementation of any cuts to these services while we work with service users, carers, the voluntary sector and the NHS.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just so everybody's aware, there is no time limit on this, so everybody will get to speak eventually. Councillor Wingfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm one of the members who's been around long enough to remember when the Liberal Democrats were in a previous reincarnation as an opposition. I recall Councillor Jeff Hook moving their budget one year in the chamber at Camberwell, saying the budget had been written on the back of a cigarette packet. He was always too honest for his own good. He then proceeded to hold up a cigarette packet, and the Liberal Democrat budget was written all over it. That Liberal Democrat budget was a veritable treasure chest compared to the poverty of ideas and scarcity of thought in the present Lib Dem budget. Let's talk about the environmental proposals. Bulky waste collections. Not only is the Lib Dem commitment short of the current cost, it would also lose the over £150,000 income we're getting from bulky waste at the moment. It would be enough to fund another 8 street cleaners. In terms of fixed penalty notices for running engines, well, we currently are looking at giving our parking attendants the powers to instruct drivers to turn off their engines, as fines can only be issued if you approach the driver and request them to turn it off in the first place. And those fines are capped by law at £20. So in other words, we need to fine 2,500 drivers in order to break even. Will you go out and find them for us? However, officers are committed, we're looking at the Camden example, to introducing school-time road closures near the most polluted schools in Southwark. On emissions-based parking permit, half the borough is free from the need of a parking permit. So that will penalise the people in the north of the borough, your very own constituents, especially those in street properties, as on the council estates they can park for free. They quote Islington, but Islington is a total CPZ borough. So you want to introduce the CPZs across the whole of the borough with your budget amendment. And you also want to start charging residents on council estates for parking. In terms of diesel, I'm currently working with officers and the DVLA and Westminster Council to look at the system that's been introduced to incorporating here in Southwark. And I'm also looking at alternatives we can use as a council fleet. Finally, this Lib Dem budget is full of commitments, but no thought on their revenue implications. And by disguising the effect of the hidden charges on the poorest people, especially in their own wards, this budget proposed by the Liberals is nothing more than utterly disgraceful, deceitful and deplorable.
Councillor Bill Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Children and Adult Services represents 2/3 of this Council's budget, and we are committed to the continued provision of a safe and high-quality service. This is stark contrast to the current government's position on these vital services. It's their pernicious cuts to local government that has caused this crisis in adult social care. Make no mistake about that. despite the additional and paltry precept. Then you turn to the Lib Dems' proposal in their alternative budget of a stay of execution on the adult social care budget and injecting an extra £316,000 for a consultation period. That £316,000 equates to 3 weeks service delivery in real terms. It's not consultation, it's gesture politics. And it's the kind of gesture politics they really should be ashamed of. It's disgusting, in one word. And it only shows that they're not fit for government and not fit to run a council. I commend our budget.
Councillor David Noakes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to, in the spirit of a fraternal friendship, extend my invitation to Councillor Williams and to my other Labour colleagues to join the hundreds of Labour members who are joining the Liberal Democrats. In fact, over 4,000 new members last month alone. I know my Labour colleagues are also keen to think that the world's problems started in 2010, and they seem to want to airbrush out Tony Blair. But I should remind them that for 13 years they were in power, and it was thanks to the state of the public finances that they left with the coalition inherited that we're having to face some of the cuts and difficult decisions that we are making today. And although they don't seem to want to remember Tony Blair, with their current leadership, I would suggest that they may want to very soon remember Tony Blair as a Labour leader who could actually win an election. Now, in regards to the social care precept, yes, let's make it very clear we do support the social care precept, and we support it not because we think that's how adult social care should be paid for in this country, but because that is the only game in town. It's a bit like the free schools, it was a bit like the academies under Labour. There is no other choice, unfortunately, and that is why we support the social care precept. Where, unfortunately, I think colleagues on the other side are sending mixed messages, and where I do not support them, is that they talk about protecting the front line, they talk about protecting the most vulnerable in our community, and yet from day one, and these cuts were being made under our administration, because social care cuts didn't start under the coalition government, they started back in the Labour years. They're cutting those vulnerable services. They took 100% of the funding away from the voluntary day centres, and their latest proposals are to close the learning disability centres and to lose frontline services. So the fact is that you say you're protecting frontline services and protecting the most vulnerable, but the reality is that has not and never has been the case. The second is the failure, I'm afraid, of the administration to actually properly consult and engage not only our service users, but our families, their families, our own providers and our partners, whether it's on the voluntary day centres or the mental health day centres, or the recent decision to unilaterally withdraw our council social workers from the South London and Maudsley co-located teams. The fact is that there are real challenges facing adult social care. No one doubts that. But the repeated claims by the administration and the language that they put in their council reports that frontline services are being protected and the use of terminology such as efficiency initiatives or efficiencies throughout the report fails to represent the true cost of these charges and cuts in the impact they will have on the quality of the lives of some of our most vulnerable members of our community. Madam Mayor, the reality is that tonight it is the votes and decisions of administration councillors that will decide the future services and lives of some of our most vulnerable residents. I urge them to make the right decision.
Councillor Jasmine Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to speak on a little bit on Amendment D to tackle that, Amendment A, a little bit maybe on the last contribution. Amendment D, I think, it's absolutely right when the world feels like it's gone a little bit mad or completely mad to think about the plight of refugees. Now, it's absolutely right. But I'm not sure what Amendment D actually adds, because on the one hand it's saying 29k, but then on the budget line here, we've got 2 million for no recourse. And that's not all there is to say about it, because actually there's a sustained lobby to the government to actually meet the real costs of supporting refugee families, because the grant doesn't really cut it. It's actually there are so many hidden costs to supporting refugee families, and of course, we cannot let the government off. We have to, completely say to them that they have to pay, every penny to support refugees properly. Now, there are a couple of things to say on this issue, and that is the key issues. Obviously, we want to support every refugee. The key issues are the Syrian programme, which you've mentioned, but also the DUBS programme. I mean, the government have absolutely behaved shamefully on this. We had an amendment, DUBS had an amendment to the Immigration Act. We withdrew the amendment on the basis that the government were going to bring all those children from the camps, that were in danger, our fair share in Europe. We said 3,000. After 350, Amber Rudd has said, actually, we're going to shut the door on it now. And do you know what she's blaming? She's actually pointing the finger at local authorities, saying consultations with us. And yet, Southwark, we don't rely on gimmicks for our support. We're working with the front bench. Today, we were briefing them about how we can actually reassert the DUBS amendment under the Children and Social Work Bill at report stage. So we're busy doing that. On Amendment A, absolutely applaud my colleagues Catherine and Vicky. The campaign that they've done about education, support that. Also, I wanted to make a plug for our scrutiny, which on March the 9th, we will be in a laboratory-type condition, a school of all places, scrutinising a number of things about schools, but funding formula will be one of them. And the last thing I wanted to say, Mayor, if I may, and that is, I just remember, I am very worried about, all the constituents that I support. And we have made this budget and we've made a good fist of it, but not in the circumstances of our own choosing. And I'll tell you one thing, I'm very worried about cut after cut. And where did it start? These limits were put by the Tories, propped up by the Lib Dems. And we will not forget that. And what do we need? We need a Labour government, because we are the only people talking about redistribution, and we will not forget that.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Setting a council budget is always a difficult balance between protecting the vulnerable and protecting universal services, between raising the funds needed to deliver those services and minimising the negative impacts on lower income residents. The Lib Dem spokesperson spoke about benefit cuts hitting the most vulnerable, and he's absolutely right. Bedroom tax, the benefit cap, local housing allowance cap, and the introduction of universal credit with a very punitive taper. These are all things hitting the vulnerable in Southwark. And they're all things that the Lib Dems voted for and supported. They wouldn't have come through were it not for the help of Simon Hughes and the Liberal Democrats. I'm glad that our Cabinet member confirmed that Labour will continue to support residents on lower incomes with our council tax relief scheme. But again, that council tax relief scheme would not have been needed, would not have been necessary, were it not for the Lib Dems voting to hit the most vulnerable in our communities. So yes, they're right, there will be an impact, and it is a difficult balance, but it is hundreds of times worse because of the decisions that they made with the Conservatives in government. The Director of Finance has said that the Lib Dem proposals are legal, balanced and implementable. That, I'm sure, is correct. That judgment wouldn't have been made if it wasn't felt that was the case. But they are exceptionally risky. Now, let me point to the proposal to increase council tax collection by £900,000. Think about that in the context of all the benefit cuts that you, your party and Simon Hughes are directly responsible for implementing in Southwark. Putting universal credit through at the moment, with people waiting up to 7 weeks, is going to have a massive impact on some people's ability to pay. Yes. And that, again, it's your fault. This is what you have done, what you have brought to our borough. And that is immensely risky. I think you have to be sensitive about these things. I think you have to set a budget that is realistic. These are difficult times, I'm afraid for this and many other reasons we must vote against the Liberal Democrat and Conservative amendments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Del Morris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things that I passionately believe in. One is that all members and officers of the Council are here to achieve the best outcome for the current residents of this borough, and that genuine consultation is key to getting this right. And two, that Southwark's planning documents should provide the foundations for all aspects of our health and well-being, how we live, work and play, and that the planners hold the power to deliver that vision. It's nationally recognised that planning departments are under-resourced and under pressure to get homes built. That's why Liberal Democrats see the importance of a well-resourced planning department and want to boost the income this council receives. Let's take advantage of one of the few crumbs the government is throwing us from the Housing White Paper. Local authorities can increase planning fees by 20% from July, which could mean an additional $290,000 for planning in Southwark. And let's apply for the extra 20% available for those authorities who welcome house building. Southwark recorded the third largest increase in GDP in London in 2016, and development is set to continue. So let's make sure we tap into every resource we can from those who can afford it. This way, perhaps we could ensure that planners have time to talk more to residents like they do to developers, not rely on developer consultations, which are skewed in favour of the development and where schemes rarely change regardless of what the residents say. I'm delighted that we might win a planning award, and we might be doing well on processing times, but if we slowed down slightly, perhaps we could avoid situations where an officer is telling residents they don't have time to view an application site from their neighbouring property, or an officer assumes that nobody lives next door to a site because they haven't had the time to check, or an officer agrees to amendments or removes conditions on an approved development because they haven't got time to fully understand why those conditions were imposed, or to go back to resident objectors and ask them why. I've heard of one senior council officer telling the staff that the majority of residents are in favour of regeneration, and it's a vocal minority that aren't. Well, from the correspondence and conversations I have with residents, I don't believe that to be the case. At a recent meeting, a developer said they had to settle 200 cases of right to light on one development. And we need to make sure that we're working to protect our residents from such adverse impacts. We don't have all-out NIMBYism in Southwark, but we do have residents who care about their neighbourhood and their future living standards, and so should we. Even the current Tory housing minister talks about the important role of communities in the planning process. Let's make sure that we work with our existing residents to get the best results for them. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hargrove.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start by speaking on the Lib Dem Amendment C. We're going to talk about enforcement, keeping Southwark cleaner and greener. They're suggesting that we're soft on fly tipping. We've already issued 180 fixed penalty notices and prosecuted 26 businesses. So don't believe those scaremongering comments. And going forward, we're moving away from fines to prosecution, as this is a greater deterrent, and investing in environmental enforcement officers, taking our team from 4 to 7. In terms of Amendment D, as Councillor Anud Al-Samurai said, was symbolic and going to raise £29,000, well, we're serious about what we do to assist refugees and asylum seekers in our borough. You can see it from the budget. We're increasing the no recourse to public funds by £2 million. My colleagues, Councillor Mills and then Councillor Ali, spoke about our commitments, read the Dubs Amendment, and our commitment already to resettlement of Syrian refugee households. In addition, we also fund organisations like Community Southwark and other advice providers like Citizen Advice Bureau, which assist refugees, and organisations that assist refugees. The total advice contract, £1.2 million. And organisations that work with refugees, such as Southwark Day Centre for Asylum Seekers and the Somali Integration and Development Association, AINA Women's Group, to name just 3. So I don't really think you can point this out to us that we're not doing enough for asylum seekers and refugees. We'd like to do more, but as you've already heard all night long, that we are a council under severe budgetary pressures.
Councillor Kerslake.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't sure if I was going to speak again, but looking at the Lib Dem budget, it's so bizarre that I kind of felt like I had to. I think it's really important to say that we had a day's scrutiny in OSC, and I don't remember any of these issues being raised in this format, certainly not the concerns on council tax or I think any of these proposals. And I'll just pick out 4 that I'd like to raise to Council Assembly. So, the Lib Dems often talk about consultation, but they want to get rid of Southwark Life, which is a useful source of information for all our residents. They say that they're Democrats, but the way that they talk down local politicians sometimes, and particularly our cabinet, suggests that they don't value them and they think that only people who are independently wealthy should be councillors. They say that they're Liberals, but they have this strange proposal in times of extreme cuts to spend more money on promoting marriage, which isn't for everybody. And I'd just say as an aside that, I had a legal ceremony at Peckham Registry Office and I thought it was a great service and there's a range of cost options there, so I'm not quite sure where they're going with that, and you feel like the ghost of David Cameron is in the room. Finally, they might say that they like to party, but as Councillor Johnson-Sittu has pointed out, they seem to want to hammer our world-class nighttime economy for no particular reason. I'm not sure this is radical. I think it's quite inconsistent. And I'm not sure that they're serious about a lot of these things. And I'm afraid to say that I couldn't trust them with my money, and I don't think my constituents could.
Councillor Peter John.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Colley said at the outset, what we sought to do over the last 7 years is create an economy in Southwark which has sound economic foundations. And I was very heartened by the CBRE, who published a report at the weekend, which indicated over the next decade, Southwark will see the largest growth in GDP of any borough in London at 42%, and the largest growth in work. That is good news, which we should celebrate in our borough. Councillor Ben Johnson, who seems to have gone all Trotsky tonight, talked about our apparent financial incompetence and mismanagement. Well, I don't think there's any councillor who doesn't disagree that council tax is a regressive tax. It is not the most efficient and effective way of paying for council services, and services such as adult social care. But as Councillor Noakes said, it is the only game in town at this time. We know it's a regressive tax, and we have avoided any council tax rises for 7 years. But we have got to that point, quite frankly, where there is no option other than to take that 1.99% rise this year. There is no serious option, given the amount of money that we're again losing this year from our budget, as Councillor Colley spoke about. So it is with regret that we put forward this council tax rise this evening. But as I say, we do have to maximise our income so we can maximise the services we continue to provide on the front line. Services to people such as refugees. And I do think that actions and the actions of this Southwark Labour administration speak louder than words or hollow gestures. We are working with Southwark citizens. We are working with the Salvation Army to rehome 5 Syrian refugee families every year and give them the support into work and into a future in our borough. We are looking after 32 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children at this time, and 7 Dublin III children. We are playing our part, and Southwark will always play its part as a home for refugees. And I want to mention finally what we say on Amendment A, Madam Mayor, because it is serious. It is not too early for us to make the case, Councillor Lyons, that the threat to schooling and funding of schooling in our borough is really high and is a clear and present danger which we must address. We cannot afford to have the national funding formula imposed in the way it currently is proposed. £335 million would ensure that no school is worse off, and the government has to listen to the case that is being made, not just by us, but councils across London, parents, governors and those who are interested in the future of our children.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last night, King's Hospital told Scrutiny that on New Year's Eve there were 16 patients who presented at A&E who were over the age of 95. I'm going to repeat that, 16 patients who are over the age of 95. So that single statistic highlights the huge pressures that exist on our health services and what we need to tackle. The situation won't change overnight. We need to find new ways to support individuals with multiple long-term conditions, support our ageing populations, face off with our providers who are increasing costs, and tackle the recruitment gap that exists in social care. We're in a precarious position. We're having to make really difficult decisions to ensure that we can continue to provide the services for our residents. The social care precept provides, frankly, pittance to help us solve that problem. And it's not only our services that are under strain. The Sustainability and Transformation Plan for South East London identifies a gap of £934 million by 2020. That's an almost unfathomable sum of money. Issue after issue has been brought to scrutiny this year. We've worked really hard to test the work of the Council and make recommendations to further protect and support our residents. And I want to take a moment to thank my committee members for all of their work. But it's not all bad news. We're doing many innovative things in this borough. Teo Shittu House has opened to provide new extra care housing, and our contracts for home care will have further protections to support our staff in line with our ethical care charter. Now is the time that we need to be setting a clear direction to ensure that our social care services are sustainable. And the way forward won't be easy. We will need to continue to make difficult decisions and carry out effective scrutiny whilst this government fails to take the issue of social care seriously. The risks are too great for us to do nothing. A two-tier social care system is not what I want for this country. But whilst we fight a battle with national government, there is also a fight to be had on our doorstep. It is with a heavy heart that I will vote to increase council tax and take the social care precept. But in return, I want something back. I want to ensure that we are getting the best from all our services, and that means working with our providers, with the CCG and with our own officers to make sure that we are being as efficient as possible. This budget wholeheartedly embraces this huge challenge. I, for one, am proud to be a member in a borough trying to do our best in the face of Tory disregard for our residents, and I will continue to fight for our residents to ensure we are delivering for them every day.
Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's been an awful lot of bleak news this evening, but I have personally been buoyed by the exciting news of the increase of the Labour vote in Faraday Ward by 1, or perhaps only my personal vote, and I thank Comrade Johnson for his conversion to the light, and I look forward to seeing him at the polling station. Nobody in this Labour group came into this council to cut services. We're not Tories. We don't relish, like Councillors Lyon and Mitchell, the excitement of destroying local infrastructure. Nobody in this party came in with a wishy-washy view about what we wanted to do. We came in with an ideological commitment about increasing the role of the government locally, nationally and internationally to provide for human basic needs, not just agreeing with the last person we spoke to, like a Liberal Democrat. We didn't come into this chamber to talk bipartisan politics and put forward legitimate ideas about reforming our allowances only to bundle them up with refugees and treat them like a political football. No. We came here to do something good and positive, and it is with a heavy heart that I hold this budget in my hands. And we, as a Labour group, have expressed this evening our pitiful shame at having to present further cuts to this local authority, which by and large voted Labour and voted against the sorts of cuts which are contained within this. And it is an embarrassment, and we should go out to our communities and tell them about what an embarrassment that is. It is a shame, it is a disgrace that we have to increase a regressive and abhorrent tax on ordinary working people in order to pay for our basic statutory needs. And if I was a councillor in so many local authorities across this country, where the principal thing that you do is just pass a budget once a year, and you agree with the ideological imperatives of this Conservative government to turn local government into the democratic lipstick on a bureaucratic pig, then I would be ashamed and I could not vote for it. But the truth is that within these thickened pages there is light and there is hope, because this is not everything that this council is doing. It is not everything that this Labour group is doing. This council keeps us in a position where we can maintain our manifesto promises. It means that we are in a borough where we are the ethical care charter borough, we are the living wage borough, we are a borough with the most ambitious council house building scheme, we are a borough that is sacrificing money in order to ensure free swim and gin in order to protect young people across this borough who are suffering from an obesity crisis. And that is why, as regrettable as the decisions within this are, it is with a heavy heart I shall vote for this. Because I am not proud of cutting services. I am not proud of the pressure we are under from a Conservative government aided and abetted by an incumbency factor that is purely from Simon Hughes and his accomplices over there. But I am proud of our vision for this entire local authority. I am proud of our vision for this country, overwhelmingly backed again and again by the people in this borough. And I commend, with a heavy heart, the conclusions in our budget. Thank you.
Councillor Hubber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The benefits of increasing fees as a way of producing income and protecting frontline services must be obvious. We believe that behaviour that causes pollution and nuisance for residents should be targeted so as to give something back to the people who are suffering. In an area like Southwark, which is increasingly promoting itself as a central London borough, we've seen a boom in the late-night economy. When Tessa Gell, when she was Secretary of State for Culture, introduced licensing reforms, we were promised a continental-style cafe culture would follow. Sadly, the results have been rather different. Instead, many residents in this borough living near premises with late-night licences are suffering from noise, antisocial behaviour, people using their homes as toilets and sometimes violence. I think it's not disputed that alcohol features highly in crime, and unfortunately policing and street cleaning costs have gone up in an attempt to tackle the worst effects. In recognition of these unfortunate circumstances, the government has allowed council since 2012 to introduce a special levy on premises with late-night licences to cover the additional costs to the police and the council. I was a bit disappointed and surprised that Councillor Shittu should dismiss this idea so readily, because a string of Labour-run councils in London have already introduced a late-night levy. Islington led the way years ago, followed by Camden. Tower Hamlets started theirs in January, and Hackney is another borough which has recently agreed to bring in such a levy as well. Yet again, unfortunately, we seem to be behind our neighbours, and as regeneration continues in the borough at breakneck speed, in fact, there'll be more and more pressure to have a growing nighttime economy, and problems will get even worse than they already are unless we take some action. A significant number of premises already exist in Southwark with late-night licences, and there may come a time when we think that there are too many. But at this stage, obviously we recognise that the nighttime economy is very important. However, a late-night levy would bring in welcome additional income to the council and the police, and it would help tackle the worst experiences and excesses of the nighttime economy without taking funding away from those other council services. There's a simple way of avoiding the need for a council tax hike. We've been discussing this proposal for years already in Southwark. I understand that it's due to be discussed again at the next meeting of the licensing committee. So let's just get on with it.
Councillor Cryan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry about that. I really wanted to touch on quite a few things, actually. First of all, a little bit about Amendment B. Well, I won't say much about Amendment B, apart from the fact I'm actually scared to go to Dulwich Village now. It looks like a crime hotspot with graffiti and crime and burglary. So, stay well away from it. In terms of Amendment C, cutting council propaganda. It's not propaganda. Southwark Life is where we actually listen to people's stories, people who live in the borough, their own stories, and we actually launch consultation.
If I had £1 for every time the opposition mentioned the word consultation, we could pay for the Southwark Lights 5 times over. We really could. And, you know, this fee for fly tipping, I'm really sorry. The last time I saw fly tipping on the corner, the person hadn't left their name and address. I don't know who they are, where they are. How do we, you know, the cost of enforcing that, the cost of investigating that is purely not factored into this at all. Well, that might be Noom, but Noom isn't Southwark. And unlike the party sitting opposite me, we don't do hand-wringing politics. We don't do piety. We don't do altruistic gestures. We do real politics. We make things happen for our residents, and we've helped to support and improve their lives. Ours is a budget of aspiration, despite the cuts, not a budget of punitive measures. There's absolutely no aspiration on the benches opposite me at all. Now, Syria is one of the biggest humanitarian crises in our lifetimes, and we have made a public commitment to support refugees fleeing from Syria. We've increased our budget for no recourse to public funds by £2 million. I've actually sat with that team and I've seen the work they do, the difference they make to people's lives. I've heard the stories of refugees who have suffered and are coming here to settle and make a new life. And I can tell you that this £2 million is worth much more than £29,000 will ever do. It is not altruistic. It is not to make us feel better. It is to help make a difference to people in a way that is positive. Now, I've got loads more to go on about, but I know I haven't got much time. And I know that obviously the £2 million won't solve the refugee crisis. I know that offering 5 homes to 5 families over 5 years, helping 25 Syrian families, will not solve the refugee crisis. But it is action. It is action that we are taking. And I'd like to thank the Salvation Army and Southwark citizens for actually making that absolutely fantastic, wonderful offer. But we are more than pleased to accept. We really are. And I would like to thank them from the bottom of our hearts. I think everybody here would on that. But these are actions that are real. £29,000 is just a feel-good, let's all feel smug about ourselves measure. It will not resolve the crisis. It will make, it is a drop in the ocean.
Councillor Sammy Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In fact, I would like to first of all thank the cabinet member for the Councillor Fiona Colley for her stewardship of the, of the position she holds, because clearly this budget demonstrates a very pragmatic and very, prudent way of our stewardship. Now, don't forget, there hasn't been any increase for the past 7 years. We're talking about council tax rises. I heard, in fact, I would say the person probably spoke the most intelligent, I would say, forgive me if it sounds insulting, in this debate is actually Dr. Ben Johnson, because he supports the 3% increase. He sees the importance of why we need this increase. Don't forget, when we watch our news, we find on the news increasing demand, especially social care. Schools are losing funding. Now, where is the money going to come from? Of course, if you ask me, do I want an increased council tax? Of course, no. Nobody wants to pay extra tax. However, if you want improved services, improved schools, improve social provision, the money has to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, the only option this administration has, in order to raise enough to meet this increasing demand, is through this channel. So it is very irresponsible of this administration not to use the weapon we have at our disposal by using the precept of 3% and also 1.9% of council tax. Now, some people suggest that perhaps people have used more of our reserve. Yes, that's an option. But don't forget, in the last 7 years, the reserve which stood at, how much was it, 99 million pounds, is now reduced to about 46. Just imagine, if you keep on spending your savings, sooner or later, there'll be nothing left. And this is a party that's teaching us about prudence. Of course, we don't know whether it has been a sweetheart deal. Maybe you should ask them. Thank you.
Councillor John Hartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Some of my Labour colleagues may not yet be aware that just a couple of hours ago, NASA announced an amazing discovery, a mere 40 light years away from Southwark, in which the TRAPPIST-1 system has a solar system where they found not one Earth-sized planet, but 3 Earth-sized planets in the famous Goldilocks zone. This single discovery means that we are far more likely to see simple, maybe even complex life in what is, cosmically speaking at least, our own backyard. And it probably fundamentally changes our understanding of humanity's place in the universe. Viewed from that perspective, it would be an easy trap to see the decisions that we make tonight as inconsequential or parochial. Not a trap that the Labour group, the Cabinet or the officers that have worked with them have fallen into. There's been an enormous amount of work into making this budget work. But sadly, and clearly, the opposition groups had some forewarning of this news from NASA, because that is exactly the attitude that they have brought to their amendments. My colleagues have covered this in some detail, and I won't go back over what they've done. But in addition to the pie-in-the-sky stuff, the cuts to the contracts, the changing of the council tax collection rate, the pilot schemes that make money. These things are easy to put in when you're in opposition. They're almost as bad as scraping the bottom of the barrel with councillors' allowances to fix everything. But let's look at their specific proposals. As Councillor Johnson-Situ highlighted, they're looking at a tax on going out, a tax on a night out in Southwark. What a great proposal that is, with no consultation, no thought process. We see 2 separate taxes on those who want to improve their own homes in the borough. Fantastic work. 2 separate taxes again on those who'd like to park in the borough. Again, no consultation, no work with local people, just impose. And as Councillor Kieran Williams highlighted, when they say that they're going to be fairer with their registry office fees, they're actually talking about a tax on getting married. I guess that's fairer for those of us that aren't planning to get married or those that are lucky enough to have already done so. These are badly thought out proposals. They are not the result of an opposition that is looking to take power or do anything substantial for the people of Southwark. The Tory amendment itself is probably worse. It's parochial, not just on a cosmic scale, but for the second year running, it refuses to raise its vision above that of Dulwich. Surely some proposals for the whole of the borough. But I was struck by Councillor Schimmel's point that the differences that we can make in our proposals tonight are probably a sticking plaster, potentially on the gaping wound of local need that Tory government cuts have left us with. Well, if this is a sticking plaster, it is, as the leader pointed out, the only game in town. If this is a sticking plaster, why are the Lib Dems planning to tear it off?
Councillor Dolezal. Councillor Dolezal, wake up.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for reminding me to wake up while speaking, Madam Mayor. It's something I'm sure Julia at home would very much appreciate. However, there is that bit where we talk about the budgets. They're not in isolation. They've happened over years, and we have experienced some devastating years from Tory governments. I remember the Thatcher years where there were massive cuts in budgets, and we did have a Labour government, a Blair government, who came back and we reinvested in health, we reinvested in schools, and we introduced things like the Sure Start. All these things, the Lib Dem Tory coalition, and now the Tories they allowed back into power with newfound pernicious cut appetites, are actually cutting and taking out of our communities. That is the appalling thing. Our budget, and I totally agree with Councillor Fleming and with John, we don't want to be here, but what we're having to do is not take difficult decisions or hard decisions. What we are having to do is respond to a set of circumstances that are not of our making in the best possible way to protect the most vulnerable that we can. That is the bit that we do.
That is not the bit that they do, and I'm not sure that it actually comes across their horizon in Dulwich. But that's why we're here, to make sure that we make best use of the mechanisms that we have available to us to invest in our communities. There's a bit of commentary about planning and how terrible it is and how much we ought to do better. Last year, between January 2016 to January 2017, on only the schemes that we spent over 100,000, we spent £21 million on social housing, building council houses. We invested in parks. We invested in road safety. We understood the archaeology of our borough. We understand where we live, and we're able to share that with people. Things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do if we did not have a positive approach to regeneration and a massively effective planning department, which sometimes people can be critical of, but it is doing some of the most difficult things that we do, which is about making change. Consultation is doesn't always feel like consultation. It feels a bit more like refereeing between warring factions. And finally, I was taken by the idea of making marriage fairer. And we played about with one or two things, and it's sort of like the Lib Dems Cupid's cash, or Southwark's VAT, Valentine added tax. Anyway,
thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. I know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Tom Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in this 8th consecutive year of government funding cuts, I'm proud to be a member of a group that has put a lot of time and effort under the direction of Councillor Colley in making sure that this is the fairest possible budget it can be in difficult times. Which is why I find the Lib Dem proposals before us tonight such an insult, the 2 pages of them that there are. But let me first start by having a quick look at the Tory proposals. They are, of course, very Dulwich-centric. I wouldn't expect anything else, both members representing Dulwich, of course. But I think it's short-sighted to suggest that there's a saving to be made from taking away trade union facility time. You know, at a time when the council is going through a large amount of turmoil for staff, the trade unions are there to help with that process and to assist the council in making that as smooth a transition as possible. But let's get to the Lib Dem amendments to this budget. And when I got this through the door and I read it, I thought I had just a badly formatted Lib Dem leaflet, you know. The talk of Labour's council bosses and the unfair council tax increase, I thought, you know, stick a bar chart on it and it's good to go, basically. So I started to look through some of the detail, you know, and some of the, you know, cut the cost of contracts, magic money, you know, increase council tax collection rate, magic money, you know, a tax on levy on bars and pubs, because they should not disturb their neighbours at night. I don't know how that solves that particular problem. Is it some kind of permission to disturb tax, perhaps? As someone who got married last year, I'm, you know, glad I did with the imposition of what I think quick top of the head sums would amount to about £1,000 per couple, I think, in Southwark per marriage. I may be wrong, and I'm happy to be told if so. But also two taxes on planning, 2 taxes on people who park. I don't really get where they're going with it. I don't really get what the direction is here. It just seems to be there to add up to a headline on a leaflet about no increase on council tax. So based on this, and on this, you know, which I think looks like it was done on the top of the bus, perhaps, on the way home from the pub, I'd say if there is an SRA to be cut, it should be the Liberal Democrat leader's SRA, because nothing went into this at all. So I know the work that our group and Councillor Colley has done to make this as fair as possible, and which is why I support a really difficult budget with a heavy heart, but with my head held high. But if this was the effort my group had put in, I couldn't even look my residents in the face. Thank you.
Councillor Charlie Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say Councillor, marriage is a good thing, you know. I've been married a long time. As long as I do as I'm told, you know, that's another story. Now, it's interesting tonight that we've heard the name of Tony Blair twice tonight. I mean, we all remember in '97 when the Labour government took charge. We remember what schools were like in those days. We remember children in primary schools, what the toilets were like in the yard, an old toilet block with no roof. Well, we got rid of them straight away. One of the earliest things we got, and we got proper toilets for proper children, and that was a great thing to do. We improved education beyond recognition. You know, all right, some people don't like the academy scheme. Maybe the jury's still out on that, but the results we have in London especially are tremendous compared with what they once were. We've got children now, they're getting 5 GCSEs where some kids would struggle, you know, and we've got all sorts of mentoring going on in our schools. And if you condemn Mr Blair for anything, you can condemn him for improving our education system. The couple of amendments we've got in front of us, the Tories go on about Labour's years, bad economy and all the rest of it, that drip, drip, drip effect. Now, if you look, Mr Gove, was it the last Chancellor they had before last? He was going on about getting rid of that deficit. Was it Gove? I can't remember his name. Anyway, they're faceless people, whoever they are. Get rid of that deficit. Oh, that's the first thing we're going to do in a couple of years. Gone very quiet on a deficit now. What is it? It's bigger now, I think, than when we left power in 2010. So, and a couple of other little things that Lib Dems want to do. I mean, I don't see loads of urine-stained mattresses and fridges on every single corner dumped. It's not true. No, seriously. I mean, you're all going to go, yeah, it is. But it's not, you know. When's the last time, Nick, you saw a urine-stained mattress? So, I think, and also, I mean, the nighttime economy's great. I love, you know, getting out and about in the evenings, and you find new friends. You're my best friend. I love you.
I love you too, Charlie.
I'm going to lose all that, you see. And the last thing is the Southwark newspaper. I mean, how are the residents of Southwark going to know who Peter John is if we get rid of that? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Colley, you have to follow that. You have 3 minutes to sum up all those replies.
Madam Mayor, I think we've had a delightful and enjoyable debate with some really, really important contributions from across the Labour benches in any case. Mostly. I want to particularly thank Councillor Rose and Councillor Cotto for raising the really important issue of schools funding and the threat to our education services. I hope that their amendment is one that all parties in this chamber tonight will support. I have to say, though, that I have been somewhat puzzled by the contributions of the Liberal Democrat members, but I think I've worked it out. I think they have actually been watching too much American television, and like Donald Trump staffer Kellyanne Conway, they think they can get away with alternative facts. Alternative facts where local government, the years of local government cuts have nothing to do with them or the coalition government. Alternative facts where the crisis in health and social care has magically emerged in the last year and a half. And alternative facts where it's financially responsible to propose fantasy income figures which they know full well are not achievable. Madam Mayor, nobody wants to see a council tax increase, and it is very much the last resort for us to put this forward. But the real fact is that the choice is between a council tax increase or even deeper cuts to services. But despite this, as Councillor Mills and indeed Councillor Fleming have said, nonetheless we have much to be proud of here in Southwark. We should be proud of the growth which Labour has fostered here. We should be proud of our dedication to modernisation and innovation in our services. And we should be proud of our determination to spend every penny as if it were our own. This is what has allowed us to stand out amongst councils, keeping our fairer future promises, keeping our council tax low and protecting our most valued public services. So I urge all members to reject the Lib Dem alternative facts, alternative budget, and to support our Labour budget tonight.
We shall now vote on the amendments. So, those in favour of Amendment A, please show.
Unanimous, Madam Mayor.
Unanimous, thank you. Carried. We will now vote on Amendment B. Those in favour of Amendment B, please show. Those against?
Madam Mayor.
57. Any abstentions? No. That amendment is lost. Vote on Amendment C. Those in favour of Amendment C, please show.
Trust, Madam Mayor.
Those against?
Madam Mayor.
Any abstentions?
2, Madam Mayor.
So that is also lost. Amendment D. Those in favour, please show.
14, Madam Mayor.
14. Those against?
45, Madam Mayor.
45. Any abstentions? So that is also lost. So we are now going to carry out the procedure for taking a recorded vote on the substantive motion. The bell will be rung at the beginning and end of 1 minute, after which the doors to the room will be closed as far as we can, and I advise all members to stay in their seats. Okay. The bell has been rung and the doors to the meeting have been closed. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive motion. I shall ask the clerk to call the names of all members in alphabetical order, and each member present shall declare if they are for, against or abstain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Akoto. Councillor Al-Samarai. Councillor Jasmine Ali. Councillor Maisie Anderson is absent. Councillor James Barber. Councillor Burgess. Councillor Chopra. Councillor Caldwell. Councillor Colley. Councillor Cryan. Councillor Dell. Councillor Helen Dennis is absent. Councillor Dixon File. Councillor Dolezal. Councillor Eastham. Councillor Gavin Edwards. Councillor Fleming. Councillor Flynn. Councillor Lucas Green is absent. Councillor Hamvers. Councillor Hargrove. Councillor Hartley. Councillor Hubber. Councillor John. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Juridada. Councillor Kerslake. Councillor King. Councillor Kirby. Councillor Octavia Lamb. Councillor Sonny Lamb. Councillor Lauder. Councillor Linford Hall. Councillor Livingston. Councillor Lowry. Councillor Luthra. Councillor Lyons. Councillor Mann is absent. Councillor McCallum. Councillor Merrill. Councillor Mills. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mohammed. Councillor Morris. Councillor Noakes. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Okosun. Councillor Pollack. Councillor Rule. Councillor Rose. Councillor Sitton. Councillor Shimel. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Johnson Situ. Councillor Michael Situ. Councillor Smith. Councillor Stones. Councillor Whitehead. Madam Mayor? 4. Councillor Bill Williams. Councillor Kieran Williams. Councillor Mark Williams. Councillor Ian Wingfield. That concludes the recorded vote, Madam Mayor. So, I'll give you the results. Okay. Absence.
Okay. I shall now announce the vote on the substantive recommendation. Those in favour of the substantive, 45. Those against, 14. So the substantive is carried.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'll ask the clerk to come in at this point.
In accordance with the Budget and Policy Framework Procedure Rule 2G, the Cabinet recommendation has been amended and this is treated as an in-principle decision. It will be implemented after 7 days unless the leader provides written notice that he objects within 5 days of the decision, or the leader can confirm at this meeting and the decision can be implemented with immediate effect. Thank you.
Councillor Peter John, do you agree to the change to the Cabinet recommendation?
I agree to it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we now move on to item 2.2. The Cabinet Member for Finance, Modernisation and Performance will present the report. Councillor Fiona Colley, you have 10 minutes in which to speak.
I'm not normally asked to present the Treasury management strategies, and I'm sure members will be delighted if I don't speak long. I will just draw people's attentions to the changes, particularly in our minimum revenue provision strategy, which allows us to restructure our debt in a prudent way, but which allows us to free up, I think it's around £5 million of money we would otherwise be putting into debt repayments, and we will reprofile that to later years.
Very good. Thank you. There are no amendments to this report. Does any member wish to speak on the report? No? Okay. You have a right to reply, apparently. Nobody's spoken. Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to the vote on the recommendations. So those in favour? Agreed? Unanimous? Is there any? Yeah. Okay, that is carried. Setting the council tax, item 3.1. I shall ask the clerk to come in at this point.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council Assembly has agreed the level of council tax for 2017-18. This is set out in the Cabinet's recommendation as agreed in the substantive motion on item 2.1 as amended by Amendment A. Council Assembly is now required to agree formally the council tax resolution in line with the decisions of item 2.1.
We shall now carry out the procedure for taking a recorded vote. The bell will be rung at the beginning and end of 1 minute, after which the doors to the room will be closed. I advise all members to stay in their seats. The bell has been rung and the doors to the meeting room have been closed. I shall now move to the vote on the substantive motion. Yeah. Okay. I shall ask the clerk to call the names for all members in alphabetical order, and each member present shall declare if they are for, against or abstain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, Councillor Akoto, Councillor Al-Samarai, Councillor Ali, Ms. Anderson is absent, Councillor Barber, Councillor Burgess, Councillor Chopra, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Colley, Councillor Cryan, Councillor Dell, Councillor Dennis is absent, Councillor Dixon-File, Councillor Dolizal, Councillor Islam, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Fleming, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Green is absent, Councillor Hanvers, Councillor Hargrove, Councillor Hartley, Councillor Haba, Councillor John, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Juridada, Councillor Kerslake, Councillor King, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Octavia Lamb, Councillor Sunny Lamb, Councillor Lauder,
Councillor Linford Hall, Councillor Livingston, Councillor Lowry, Councillor Lothra, Councillor Lyons, Councillor Mann is absent, Councillor McCallum, Councillor Merrill, Councillor Mills, Councillor Vicky Mills, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Mohammed, Councillor Morris, Councillor Noakes, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Okosun, Councillor Pollack, Councillor Rule, Councillor Rose, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Schimmel, Councillor Simmons, Councillor Johnson C2, Councillor Michael C2, Councillor Smith, Councillor Stones, Councillor Whitehead, Madam Mayor, for Councillor Bill Williams, Councillor Kieran Williams, Councillor Mark Williams, Councillor Ian Wingfield,